The wine glass shattered against the kitchen wall, red liquid splashing across the pristine white tiles. Rebecca flinched, but refused to cower as her husband Trevor loomed over her, his handsome face twisted with rage. "You embarrassed me in front of the entire board," he hissed, stepping closer with each word. 2 years at that company, and you still don't understand how to behave as my wife." Rebecca's fingers found the edge of the counter behind her, steadying herself as Trevor's tirade continued. Her wedding ring caught the light, no longer a symbol of love, but a shackle that grew heavier with each passing day. "I was just expressing an opinion about the charity initiative," she whispered, her voice stronger than she felt. "They specifically asked for input from everyone at the table, and I gave mine." Trevor's laugh was cruel and dismissive as he straightened his expensive tie. "Your opinion? Since when does anyone care what you think? You're nothing without me, Rebecca." The familiar words hit like physical blows, each one reinforcing the walls of her prison. For 3 years she had believed them, shrinking herself smaller with each passing day. Through the kitchen window, she could see rain beginning to fall on their Chicago penthouse balcony. Tonight was different, though. Something inside her had finally broken beyond repair. When Trevor turned to pour himself another scotch, Rebecca silently pulled open the drawer where she'd hidden the letter from her late aunt's attorney. The inheritance had come through last week. Enough money to disappear. "I'm going to bed," she said, slipping the folded papers into her pocket. Trevor grabbed her wrist, fingers digging into tender flesh already bruised from last week's argument. "We're not done talking," he growled, bourbon heavy on his breath. Rebecca looked down at his hand, then up at his flushed face, making a decision 3 years in the making. "Yes, we are," she whispered, yanking free and running. Trevor's roar of rage followed her as she grabbed her emergency bag from the hall closet and bolted for the service elevator. Rain soaked through her thin blouse as she ran toward Michigan Avenue, heart pounding. Behind her, she heard the building's front door slam open, followed by Trevor's voice calling her name. The Lakeside Hotel rose before her like a beacon, its elegant Art Deco facade promising sanctuary. Rebecca had meant to find a modest motel, but the storm had intensified, and the doorman had already spotted her. "Welcome to the Lakeside, madam," he said, ushering her inside the marble lobby. Rebecca clutched her small bag, acutely aware of her rain-soaked appearance amidst such luxury. At the reception desk, her shaking fingers presented her rarely used personal credit card, the one Trevor didn't monitor. "Just for tonight," she told the concerned clerk, who upgraded her to a suite when he noticed her trembling. The elegant suite on the 15th floor was larger than her first apartment. Rebecca stood dripping on imported carpet, suddenly overwhelmed by her own audacity. In the marble bathroom, she examined her reflection. Rain-plastered hair, mascara-streaked cheeks, and the shadow of a bruise forming on her wrist. For the first time in years, she felt something like hope. As she stepped from the shower, Rebecca heard a door slam in the hallway, followed by rapid, forceful footsteps. Her heart nearly stopped until she realized the sound came from the adjoining room. Through the wall, she could hear a deep voice speaking in measured tones. A man on a phone call. The voice was accented, Italian perhaps, and carried an authority that commanded attention. "The Chicago situation requires my personal attention," the voice said. "Tell them they have until tomorrow to reconsider their position. After that, I won't be generous." Rebecca moved away from the wall, feeling like an intruder on a conversation not meant for public ears. She tried to focus on her own situation, making a list of next steps. Morning light filtered through heavy curtains as Rebecca woke to an unfamiliar ceiling. For one panicked moment, she forgot where she was, then reality rushed back. Her escape, the hotel room. A gentle knock on her door sent her heart racing, but it was only room service with a breakfast she hadn't ordered. "Compliments of the management," the attendant said, wheeling in a silver cart. As Rebecca sipped coffee by the window overlooking Lake Michigan, she heard the door of the neighboring room open. Curious, she peeked through her peephole just in time to see a tall figure in a perfectly tailored suit stride toward the elevator. Rebecca ventured down to the hotel cafe, choosing a quiet corner table where she could observe without being noticed. The inheritance money bought her time, but she needed a plan beyond hiding in expensive hotels. She was halfway through her latte when he entered, the man from next door, commanding attention without trying. Dark hair perfectly styled, an expensive watch glinting at his wrist. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to power. Their eyes met briefly across the room, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. Not attraction, though he was undeniably handsome, but recognition, as if he somehow knew what she was running from. The barista greeted him by name. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," with the nervous deference reserved for those who inspired both respect and fear. His response was polite but distant, revealing an accent that confirmed her suspicions from last night. He took a seat at the opposite corner, opening a newspaper while occasionally glancing in her direction. Rebecca felt exposed suddenly, like prey being assessed by a predator, though his expression revealed nothing but mild curiosity. Her phone vibrated against the table, Trevor's name flashing on the screen for the 20th time since dawn. Panic flooded her system as she fumbled to silence it, the device slipping from her trembling fingers and clattering to the floor. Before she could move, Mr. Bennett was there, retrieving her phone with elegant efficiency. He handed it back without looking at the screen, but something in his expression suggested he'd seen enough. "Thank you," she managed, accepting the phone and declining the call with a swipe that felt like defiance. His eyes narrowed slightly at the bruise on her wrist, now darkened to an ugly purple against her pale skin. "Some men don't deserve what they have," he said quietly, his voice carrying the same authority she'd heard through the wall. "They don't know how to value it properly." Rebecca stared at him, unsure how to respond to the unexpected observation that hit too close to home. The sophisticated stranger straightened, adjusting his immaculate suit jacket with a slight nod. "If you need assistance, Ms." He paused, waiting for a name she wasn't ready to give. When she remained silent, he continued smoothly. "My room is 1502. Sometimes neighbors can be useful in unexpected ways." He departed with the same controlled grace with which he'd arrived, leaving Rebecca to wonder what kind of man offered help to strangers while conducting mysterious business in luxury hotels. She didn't know whether to feel comforted or concerned by his presence next door. 2 days later, Rebecca's tentative sense of safety shattered when she spotted a familiar face in the hotel lobby. Martin, her husband's head of security, was showing her photograph to the front desk staff while another man in a dark suit scanned the room. She ducked behind a decorative column, heart racing as she calculated her escape routes. Trevor had found her faster than she'd anticipated, his resources extending further than she'd imagined. The elevator dinged, revealing Mr. Bennett engaged in conversation with a broad-shouldered man whose vigilant posture screamed bodyguard. Bennett's eyes swept the lobby, landing briefly on Rebecca before shifting to Martin with subtle recognition that made her blood run cold. Rebecca retreated through the restaurant toward the kitchen, praying the staff entrance would provide an escape. The industrial kitchen was a blur of white uniforms and stainless steel as she wove through startled chefs and servers. Behind her, she heard Martin's voice asking about a woman matching her description. A hand suddenly gripped her elbow, pulling her behind a massive refrigerator just as the kitchen doors swung open to admit Trevor's men. "Don't make a sound," Mr. Bennett whispered against her ear, his body shielding her from view. She could feel the controlled tension in his frame, like a coiled spring ready to release. Martin moved through the kitchen, questioning staff while his companion checked the delivery entrance. Rebecca held her breath, pressed between cold metal and the warm presence of her mysterious neighbor. When the hunters finally left, Bennett guided her through a service corridor and into a freight elevator that descended to the underground parking garage. His bodyguard was already waiting beside a sleek black Audi with tinted windows. "They'll be watching all exits," Bennett said, opening the car door. "You have approximately 90 seconds to decide if you're coming with me or taking your chances with them." Rebecca hesitated, caught between the devil she knew and the devil she didn't. "Who are you? Why would you help me?" she demanded, even as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed in the garage. "My name is Adrian Bennett, and I recognize the look of someone escaping a cage," he answered, his accent thickening slightly. "The rest can wait until we're somewhere safe." 60 seconds, Ms. Rebecca Taylor, she finally offered, making her decision as Martin's voice echoed through the garage. "I hope I'm not making another mistake." The lake house was nothing like she expected, not an ostentatious display of wealth, but an elegant modern structure of glass and stone nestled among pine trees. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Lake Michigan's vast expanse, offering both breathtaking views and constant awareness of approaching threats. "You'll be safe here temporarily," Adrian said, leading her inside where a middle-aged woman was already preparing lunch. "Mrs. Winters manages the property and asks no questions, a valuable quality in my experience." Rebecca followed him through the open-concept living area, noting the subtle security features, cameras disguised as light fixtures, reinforced doors, and the 2 men patrolling the perimeter with military precision. "You're not just a businessman, are you?" she asked, accepting the glass of water he offered. The question had been building since their escape, fueled by the efficient way his people had extracted them without a trace. The lake house library revealed more about Adrian than he probably intended. First editions of Machiavelli beside modern business texts, security manuals filed alongside Renaissance art books. Rebecca ran her fingers along the spines, piecing together the man through his reading habits. At sunset, Adrian received visitors, 3 men whose expensive suits couldn't disguise their military bearing. They spoke in hushed Italian that Rebecca couldn't understand, but their deferential postures told her everything about Adrian's position in whatever hierarchy they belonged to. Mrs. Winters served dinner on the terrace, the elaborate meal contradicting her earlier claim of being just a housekeeper. The way she anticipated Adrian's preferences and monitored the security team's movements suggested years of loyalty beyond employment. Later that night, Rebecca discovered a hidden compartment beneath the guest room floorboards, containing a sealed envelope with her name written in elegant script. Inside was documentation for a new identity: passport, driver's license, birth certificate, and an offshore account with enough funds for a fresh start. Adrian's expression remained neutral as he considered her question. "I manage certain interests for my family," he answered carefully. "We specialize in resolving problems that others cannot, which occasionally requires a level of discretion." "You're in the Mafia," Rebecca stated, the pieces falling into place, the respect bordering on fear from others, the authoritative phone calls, the way Trevor's security man had hesitated upon seeing him. A smile ghosted across his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's an outdated term, but it conveys the general concept. Does that change your decision to accept my help?" Before she could answer, his phone rang with an urgent tone that seemed to trigger immediate action from his guards. Adrian's expression hardened as he listened to the caller, transitioning before her eyes from polite host to something altogether more dangerous. "It seems your husband has connections with the Chicago Police Department," he informed her after ending the call. "They've filed a missing persons report claiming you're mentally unstable and potentially suicidal." Rebecca felt the blood drain from her face as she realized the depths of Trevor's manipulation. "He's trying to have me committed so he can control my inheritance," she whispered, the pieces of the puzzle falling into horrific place. Adrian studied her with calculating intensity. "The inheritance your aunt left you, would it be significant enough to explain this level of pursuit?" $8 million, she admitted, watching his expression for signs of avarice, but finding only thoughtful assessment. "It was supposed to be my freedom, not another cage." A knock interrupted them as Adrian's bodyguard entered with urgent news. "Mr. Taylor's security team has been asking questions at the marinas. They've identified your vehicle and are canvassing properties along this stretch of shoreline." Adrian's decision was immediate and decisive. "Prepare for visitors. Move Ms. Taylor to the safe room and ensure the contingency measures are in place. No one approaches without proper identification." As his men moved with practiced efficiency, Adrian turned to Rebecca with unexpected gentleness. "I promised you safety, and I keep my promises. Now I need you to trust me one more time." From the one-way glass of the safe room, Rebecca watched Adrian transform completely as Trevor's men pulled up to the property. Gone was any trace of the gentleman who had rescued her, replaced by something cold and lethal. Trevor himself emerged from a black SUV, flanked by Martin and 2 uniformed police officers, whose uneasy expressions suggested they weren't entirely comfortable with their mission. Adrian met them at the front door, perfectly composed in casual attire that somehow made him more intimidating. Rebecca couldn't hear their conversation, but she could read the body language, Trevor's initial confidence wavering under Adrian's steady gaze, the officers glancing nervously at each other as Adrian showed them documentation they hadn't expected. Through the hidden speaker system, Adrian's voice finally reached her, ice-cold and razor-sharp. "Your wife's credit card was traced to Montreal yesterday. Perhaps your resources would be better allocated pursuing that lead instead of trespassing on private property." Trevor's face contorted with familiar rage as he jabbed a finger toward Adrian's chest, stopping just short of actual contact. "I know you're hiding her. Do you have any idea who I am in this city? Do you have any idea who I am?" Adrian responded with such quiet menace that even the police officers took an unconscious step backward. "Check your sources more carefully, Mr. Taylor. You're walking a dangerous path." The confrontation ended abruptly when one of the officers received a radio call, his expression shifting from annoyed to alarmed. Whatever information came through was enough to make them retreat, practically dragging Trevor back to the vehicle despite his protests. Rebecca emerged from the safe room once they'd gone, finding Adrian staring out at the lake with hands clasped behind his back. What happened? Why did they leave so quickly? Your husband's financial activities are under federal investigation, Adrian replied without turning around. Anonymous tip about tax fraud and embezzlement. The officers received notice that associating with him could compromise their careers. That evening, Rebecca overheard a heated phone conversation in Adrian's study, someone questioning his involvement in her situation, warning about unnecessary complications, and drawing unwanted attention. Adrian's response was measured but firm. This is not negotiable. She remains under our protection. The next morning, newspapers carried the story of Trevor Taylor's spectacular downfall. Federal agents seizing records from his office, board members distancing themselves, clients fleeing. The article mentioned anonymous whistleblowers who had provided evidence of years of financial misconduct. A burner phone arrived with breakfast, Mrs. Winters explaining it was for emergencies only, and connected directly to Adrian's security team. The simple device represented both protection and surveillance, a reminder that safety in Adrian's world came with invisible strings. Rebecca found her emergency bag in the guest room closet, somehow retrieved from the hotel without her knowledge. The casual display of Adrian's reach both comforted and unnerved her, making her wonder what other aspects of her life he had quietly arranged. Rebecca approached slowly, piecing together what had happened. You called in favors to have him investigated? Just like that, with a snap of your fingers, you've dismantled his life. Adrian turned to face her, his expression unreadable. People like your husband rely on facades, the appearance of power, of respectability. Once that facade cracks, everything else crumbles naturally. For the first time, Rebecca truly understood what kind of man had taken her under his protection. Not just dangerous, but powerful enough to rewrite someone's story with a few phone calls and the right connections. You could destroy anyone who crosses you, she whispered, uncertain whether to feel grateful or terrified. Is that why you helped me? To demonstrate your power over someone who annoyed you by making noise next door? Something flickered across his face, perhaps hurt, perhaps amusement at her boldness. I helped you because 3 years ago, my sister Kate died at the hands of a man who claimed to love her. I wasn't there to protect her then. The revelation hung between them, raw and honest, in a way Rebecca hadn't expected from someone who lived in a world of calculated moves and hidden motives. For a moment, she glimpsed the man beneath the power. 3 weeks passed in the sanctuary of the lake house, a strange limbo where Rebecca began reassembling the pieces of herself. With Trevor's assets frozen and his reputation in tatters, the immediate threat had receded, leaving room for harder questions. Adrian kept his distance, professional but kind, providing resources without imposing his presence. His security team remained vigilant, but the atmosphere had shifted from crisis to something approaching normalcy. One morning, Rebecca discovered the art studio at the far end of the property, a light-filled space with empty canvases and professional-grade supplies. You mentioned studying art before your marriage, Adrian explained when she asked about it. I thought you might want to reclaim that part of yourself. The first brushstrokes were hesitant, rusty from years of neglect, but soon colors flowed from her hands like a language rediscovered. She painted the lake in all its moods, stormy, serene, shrouded in mist, each canvas a step toward reclaiming her voice. An unexpected delivery arrived one afternoon. Her college portfolio, rescued from the storage unit Trevor had rented when he claimed her art was cluttering their home. Someone had painstakingly preserved each sketch and painting, even repairing damage to her favorite charcoal studies. During a rare dinner shared with Adrian, Rebecca learned about his childhood in Sicily, where his grandmother had taught him to respect art as the language of the soul. The conversation revealed glimpses of the boy he'd been before family obligations shaped him into the man he became. A therapist visited twice weekly, a discreet professional who specialized in domestic abuse recovery and asked no questions about Rebecca's unusual living situation. These sessions became anchors in her healing process, helping her untangle the psychological bonds Trevor had created. Rebecca discovered a small building beside the boathouse that served as Adrian's personal retreat, a simple space containing only a desk, a chess set, and a wall of photographs documenting family history. This glimpse into his private world humanized the man behind the power. Between paintings, Rebecca researched the Bennett family, discovering generations of power brokering across multiple countries. The legitimate businesses, shipping, real estate, import, export, served as the public face for something far more complex. You're creating quite an impressive collection, Adrian remarked one evening, studying her latest canvas. You have a gift for capturing light and darkness. Most people only see one or the other. The compliment warmed her in unexpected ways, but also crystallized the growing dilemma in her heart. I can't stay here forever, she said finally. Living under your protection is still living under someone else's control. Adrian's expression revealed nothing, though his knuckles whitened slightly around the glass he held. You equate my protection with your husband's abuse? They are not the same, Rebecca. No, they're not, she agreed, setting down her paintbrush and facing him directly. But freedom isn't trading one form of dependence for another, even a benevolent one. I need to stand on my own. A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sound of waves against the shore. And if Trevor finds a way around his legal troubles, his kind always do eventually. Rebecca considered this, the fear still present but no longer paralyzing. Then I'll face that when it comes. I'd rather live with uncertainty than with invisible chains, no matter how comfortable they might be. Something like respect flickered in Adrian's eyes, though mixed with frustration. At least let me help you get established somewhere safe. I know people in Boston's art community who could offer legitimate opportunities. The offer was tempting, a middle ground between total independence and continued protection. Why Boston specifically? More of your territory to keep an eye on me? She challenged, though her tone had softened. Adrian's smile was genuine this time, reaching his eyes in a way that transformed his whole face. Actually, it's the one major city where I have minimal business interests. You'd be free from both Taylor and Bennett influence. 6 months later, Rebecca stood in Boston's prestigious Newberry Gallery, surrounded by her Lake Series paintings and elegantly dressed patrons. Her debut exhibition had drawn unexpected attention, with several pieces already marked with discreet red dots indicating sales. Your work speaks to the journey from confinement to liberation, an older curator commented, studying a particularly haunting canvas where light broke through storm clouds. There's both vulnerability and strength here, quite remarkable for an emerging artist. Rebecca smiled, still uncomfortable with praise but learning to accept it. Her new apartment overlooking the harbor was modest but entirely hers, paid for with her own earnings rather than inheritance money she'd set aside for future security. The gallery owner approached with excitement, champagne flute in hand. That collector from New York is offering double the asking price for Dawn Reflection. I told him you don't negotiate on opening night, but he's persistent. Rebecca's journey had attracted the attention of a prominent women's magazine, which featured her story, carefully edited to protect identities, alongside images of her work. The article focused on art as healing, deliberately omitting any mention of Adrian or the circumstances of her escape. The success of her exhibition had secured a teaching position at a small arts college, where Rebecca guided students through their own creative explorations. The work grounded her in ways painting alone couldn't, giving purpose to the painful wisdom she'd gained. Since arriving in Boston, Rebecca had established a weekly routine that included volunteering at a women's shelter, offering art therapy sessions for survivors of domestic violence. These quiet hours brought healing full circle, transforming her experience into something that could help others find their voice. Her new circle of friends knew nothing of her past. The gallery owner, fellow artists, neighbors in her building who invited her to dinner parties. This clean slate allowed Rebecca to define herself by her present choices rather than her history, a freedom more precious than any material security. As the evening progressed, Rebecca felt a familiar prickle of awareness, the sensation of being watched with particular intensity. She scanned the room, her glass nearly slipping from her fingers when she spotted him near the entrance. Adrian Bennett looked different in Boston, his usual severity softened by casual elegance that allowed him to blend with the artistic crowd. He made no move to approach, simply raising his glass in silent acknowledgement when their eyes met. Against her better judgment, Rebecca found herself moving through the crowd toward him, curiosity overwhelming caution. I didn't expect to see you here, she said when she reached him, noticing he stood precisely in the threshold, neither fully entering nor leaving. I was in the city for business, he replied, his accent more pronounced than she remembered. I saw the exhibition announcement in the Times and thought I should see how freedom suits you. It appears to suit you very well. Rebecca studied him, noting the careful distance he maintained, present but not imposing, interested but not possessive. You kept your word about Boston. I checked quite thoroughly, you know. A hint of amusement crossed his features. I expected nothing less. Your caution is well earned. His gaze traveled to the paintings, lingering on one that depicted the lake house at dawn. You've captured it perfectly. I never properly thanked you, Rebecca said quietly. You saved me from one life and then let me walk away to build another. That's a rare kind of help that doesn't demand repayment. Adrian's expression softened, with something that might have been regret. Perhaps I understood that cages come in many forms, even well-intentioned ones. Some of us learn that lesson too late. The gallery owner appeared suddenly, eager to introduce Rebecca to an important museum curator. Will you stay? She asked Adrian quickly, surprised by how much she wanted him to say yes. Not tonight, he answered, handing her a single white business card with just a phone number embossed in silver. But unlike last time, you now have the means to find me when you're ready, if you're ever ready. As he disappeared into the Boston night, Rebecca tucked the card into her dress pocket, neither accepting nor rejecting the possibility it represented. For the first time in her life, the choice was entirely hers. Freedom, not as the absence of constraints, but as the power to determine her own path. Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying it, write in the comments which place you're watching this story from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video, because your support is important for me to continue here.